Greeting, kindred, and welcome back to our world of darkness. I am Voivode Maquette, and it's Thursday, which means we're going to be talking about another vampire clan. So, make yourself nice and comfortable. Pour yourself a glass of something red. And let's take the time to discuss one of the clans, shall we? Tonight, on the chopping block, we have Clan Brujah, or Brujah, depending on which Brujah you're talking to at the time. This is a direct discussion of the 5th edition of Vampire the Masquerade, because things have changed for the Brujah. When discussing many of the clans, you'll have your loyalists to the old world who believe that things should not have changed in any way. Then you also have those who hold on to the new books and take them as direct doctrine. But what happened in between? What brought the clans from what they were to what they are now? Just accepting that the writers decided to change things doesn't exactly sit well with me, especially considering the fact that many people, myself included, run games where their storyline has continued and they've just adapted. They've evolved the clans. I understand that some of the things are not exactly easily mended, but with a little bit of acceptance from players and storytellers alike, and a little bit of the wonderful thing that us storytellers like to call the suspension of belief. There's nothing that can't be overcome. And in the end, it's your story. Do whatever the fuck you want. And with that attitude, I would like to take a look at the rabble. Clan Brujah. They have, in and of itself, changed the most and the least out of any clan that I've seen in the 5th edition. And the reason I say that is because they are still the passionate, angry malcontents they've always been. They are still the heart and soul of the Anarch community. But Camarilla Brujah are so much more rare now. There's definitely a reason for it in the story. Much like Xavier leaving the Camarilla because the other Justicars refused to accept the incident in upstate New York as the actual rising of an antediluvian. It wasn't, but that wasn't the point. It was the fact that Xavier had served them loyally. And when you have a coterie, you expect them to have your back. And that's all the Camarilla Inner Council truly is. It's the Camarilla. It literally means the little room. It is a coterie. It is a coterie with a rotating door. Every 13 years you could be replaced by somebody else. Xavier was pissed off due to the fact that his coterie ignored him. Well, the conclave in Prague is when the Brujah felt the same. To be completely upfront about it, it wasn't all of the Brujah. It was one Brujah. It was the Archon Theobel, direct vassal of Hottestadt. Now, there's lots of rumors, and I'm sure we'll at some point in time have a video that goes in deeper into these things, but was it the fact that Theo, in front of his entire clan, had to take a knee to Hottestadt? Was it the blood boiling inside? Was it the bane of Clan Brujah finally coming up to the surface, making him feel like he was going to vomit it up all over the overly shined shoes of the Ventru who controlled him? Was it the last straw? In the Camarilla book of the 5th edition, it discusses that it may have been Hottestadt calling him boy one too many times. Theobel, after all, was embraced out of slavery. He served the inner council of his own free will, for the most part, as we know. And now he's a figurehead for the Anarchy. It's inspirational, considering how he has grown, how he has come into his own. Theobel is Clan Brujah, when you want to look at it like that. Now, they have many other famous members when you look at it. You've got Theobel Jack, Smiling Jack, the pirate. The Katarina the Wise, the Archbishop of New York. No one can forget Damsel from Bloodlines and her spirit. That's for sure. I myself has portrayed many Brujah in my time, both as NPCs and PCs. My first Brujah ever was a 1920s runner for the Mafia. Wore the shit kicker hat, suspenders, and I carried a baseball bat filled with ball bearings. I played a mute. His name was Rhino. R-Y-N-O. Rip you a new one. It was funny. It was also terrifying. The only character I have ever played that ever made a Lasombra who had 4 months more experience in that game as that character, running for his life because I threatened to beat him to death with the baseball bat. And after I knocked out one of his fangs, I had entirely meant to keep my promise. And after a long, grueling chase, and very high risks of the masquerade, I didn't stop until I had ash under my bat. Now, that being said, who are Clan Brujah? Are they the loud, obnoxious miscreants the Camarilla claims that they are? Are they the studious scholars in university libraries? Are they neo-Nazis crushing the skulls of those they don't agree with under their boots? Yes, they're all of them. Human beings, which is all that a kindred is, the darker side of humanity. It's humans who have let go of inhibition, Their diet's different, I will give you that, but it's still a game of people and relationships. The Brujah claim to be the most connected with humanity, and I think that's more because they are the wolf in sheep's clothing. They find the underdog. They take the underdog under their wing. They coach them. They fill them with spirit. They use their discipline of presence to spark the need of rebellion. That could be anywhere. The streets, unsatisfied homeless people who are tired of spikes being placed under the bridges where they can't sleep. Unappreciated gang members who decide to overthrow their leaders. Pinstripe wearing monkeys of Wall Street who are there to take the winnings from the other guy. Clan Brujah has not changed much, except for social structure. I remember a time when it was thought the Brujah had what was known as a Brujah call in our community. No matter what was going on, no matter where something was happening, if a Brujah said, "I need help," all other Brujah came. Didn't matter who they were beating. They were there. It was a brotherhood. Now we find two main types of Brujah. I'm not going to get into the fact that archetypes will make out the different types of Brujah that you're going to find, but you're going to find two main types of Brujah now. With the anti-tribute gone, which I will be covering them soon. But you have the Brujah. The Brujah who rule through empathy of the Anarchs. I'm not saying that they're sitting there listening to all the problems. They're sparking the rage in all the other clans. They are the leaders of the Anarch movement for a reason. They will give a hit. They will do it quickly. And they will look good doing it. And then you have the Hellenes. The Hellenanes, I've heard them called. I've heard them called a few different things. And as I say with a lot of things about Brujah, it doesn't matter what they actually are, what you actually think they are. It matters what you call them in front of the individual Brujah who is saying the word. They're always going to go with the guy in charge. But the Hellenes, the followers of Helena, Brujah who have decided that for whatever reason they're going to keep their loyalty to the Camarilla. Rare, but they do exist. The odd primogen here or there. The odd prince. Brujah Prince in the 5th edition. Can you really imagine? I'm sure it exists somewhere. Have many of you built a game that's Camarilla-centric and the Brujah is still holding Prince of the city? I'd like to see it. Let's get down to the brass tacks, shall we? What are Brujah known for? What are their disciplines? Celerity. They can speed. Their supernatural ability to just go. They use that frightening ways in combat. Presence. Yes, they do have dynamic personalities, and I do actually think presence is one of their most important disciplines. They use it to fuel the fire, to turn an unsatisfied human into a dangerous warrior on the street where any picked up item is a weapon in their hands at that point. They breed revolutionaries with the power of presence, but potence. That's what we'll be covering today when we get to the disciplines. Now, they're also known for their anger. It's true. But what is it about the anger that makes Clan Brujah Clan Brujah? Is it just that they're pissed? No, they're passionate. They've always been passionate. That passionate can sometimes, it overflows as the blood boils. Now, what does D5 say? Well, it says, the blood of the Brujah simmers with barely contained rage, exploding at the slightest provocation. Subtract dice equal to the bane severity of the Brujah from any roll to resist Fury Frenzy. This cannot take the pool below 1 dice. It is a direct anger on that one. And I think that is up to the player at that point to understand that their character is not going to be fine 1 second and then a burning ball of wrath the next. It's up to the player to know that that character that they're playing is always on just below the surface, ready to snap the neck of anyone who's bothering them. They're ready to strike out. They are a coiled snake, ready to strike. Now, their compulsion. The compulsion makes them rebel. The compulsion makes them, no matter who the leader is, it can be a member of the Anarchs. If the Baron tells them to do something, they will say, fuck you. Do. It's their war cry. I enjoy, personally, the compulsion of rebellion. If you look back into the distant nights, when we look at the Antediluvians gathering, both of them, Brujah two enemies. Now we'll get into the major details on that later, because eventually those stories need to be told too. But Brujah, he defied his children. Trolli, child, or just Brujah Jr. if you prefer. The child of the 3rd generation Brujah ignored unrequited love, could not handle that any longer. Brujah knew, in my humble opinion, Brujah knew that taking care of your children is one of the most important things you can possibly do. Doting on them the affection so they understand how to treat their child. Continuing the line was the most important thing. Putting that child in a strange sense of authority. You ignore authority. You strike out against authority. The child also felt that way. Eventually, that anger is going to boil up. Defiance is needed to make I've heard rumors of the Brujah and Diluvian being a woman. Do creatures that old even see themselves as male or female anymore? All that matters is even back then, in those early nights, you could tell the compulsion and the bane of Brujah bubbling to the surface until finally the antediluvian fell beneath the fangs of its own shell. There are other rumors after all, but that is the main point here. Which brings us to the brute force of Clan Brujah, and where I think it might be a good idea to consider looking at the signature discipline. Now, other clans have this. The Nosferatu have it. Anyone can learn it. It's not a big deal, not really. La Sombra are famed for having it. Hell, before the family reunion of the Hecata, the Giovanni were known for using it quite often. Hell, I'm pretty sure they still do. Cative. This is a primary discipline that most cative carry, because being stronger than your prey is necessary. So let's just dive into it. Potence. What is it? It has some nicknames. Hulking. Blood's Might. Pursuito. There's a popular saying among the members of Clan Brujah. See, even the book knows this is theirs. You only underestimate our strength once. Potence is vitae-fueled strength above and beyond other vampires' capabilities. More powerful than any performance-enhancing drug. More unnatural than the physique of any bulging bodybuilder. Potence is the best. I spoke wrong. Potence is the beast let loose through fists, feet, limbs, and raw bodily power of a vampire. The discipline is used for more than just hitting things, though it is certainly good for this task. It is the vampire's ability to force their body into action, impossible for mortals to replicate. Potence trumps the other disciplines in sheer incongruity. An elderly-looking Nosferatu strikes harder than a mortal heavyweight boxer or a Brujah embraced as a child can decapitate the target with one blow. That is graphic and understandable. Characteristics. It is a physical type discipline. You're not going to think too hard. Don't worry, you're not going to end up potently giving yourself a brain aneurysm. It is a medium masquerade threat, from medium to high. Lesser exercises of the discipline might be passed off as hysterical strength. But once pavement cracks and buildings start to crumble, the explanations loses what little credibility it had. Blood resonance caloric. The strong and healthy athletes and young men and women in their prime, gym rats, wrestlers, construction workers, lumberjacks, longshoremen, those who are stereotypically strong people. Now, think about who the Brujah surround themselves with. And think back to the analogy that I used a little earlier. Wolf in sheep's clothing. They hide themselves in restless groups. They join street gangs. They form militias. The Brujah are priming their food. They're tenderizing. They're making people strong specifically. Even if they personally do not understand it, their beast knows what it's doing. It's surrounding itself with people that it can make stronger and full of defiance, and therefore make them more delicious. So, what are the level 1 powers? Lethal body. Using this power, the user is capable of causing horrendous damage to mortals, tearing skin and breaking bones with bare fingers. It's free at cost, and the system says that the user's unarmed attacks can now do aggravated health damage to mortals, if desired. They also ignore 1 level of armor per potence level of the user. This is passive. It's always active. Now, I do know that in my troop, we choose to waive the fact that vampires don't get any benefit from armor. I don't see why they wouldn't. Because the first level of this discipline means absolutely nothing if you're fighting another vampire, so we allow. It's a house rule. It's our home brew, as you will. Soaring leap. Possessing unholy strength and more than arms and fists, the user can leap far, higher, and further than any mortal, free of cost. The system says that the user can jump a number of meters equal to 3 times of their potence level vertically and 5 times their potence level horizontally. The user need no run to make these leaps. Passive. They propel themselves through the air, either straight up or horizontally, with the strength of blood in their legs. There's near no outrunning them. Level 2, prowess. Vampires with potence gain far greater strength from their blood than those who lack it. 1 rouse check is the cost, and the system says, when activated, add the potence rating of the user to their unarmed damage value, as well as defeats of strength for 1 seed, as the duration says. So by calling on their strength of blood, you get to add your potence rating to damage value and feats of strength. It's horrendous when you think about it. What if you have 5 levels of potence? I believe the answer is fuck me. Brutal feed. Known as the Savage Kiss, this power allows the user to empty an unholy inner strength when draining a victim. In mere seconds, the attacker swallows a torrent of blood while mauling the victim. The result is an efficient, if messy, feeding, often employed in the heat of battle, when the mangled remains of the victim can be disguised. It's free of cost to use. The system says the vampire can drain a human completely in seconds, usually within a single turn. Every point of hunger slaked causes 1 point of aggravated health damage to the victim, and their blood vessels burst and organs bruise and rupture internally. Using brutal feed on a vampire does only superficial damage to their dead and inert organs. In combat, brutal feed comes immediately after a successful raw attack using fangs. The victim first takes fight damage, then damage from this power. Armor does not protect against brutal feed, as the wounds are, or at least begin, as mainly internal. Storyteller may decide such mutilation killing warrants stain. Duration 1 beating. No cost for a level 3 power. A vicious one, might I add. Speaking of level 3, we also have Spark of Rage, which is a fun amalgam power. Presence, that other special discipline of Brujah Master. Combining Potence and Presence, the vampire can incite anger and even frenzy in onlookers, as easily as awe or dread. The user must take care not to rile up an angry mob to turn on them rather than the target or each other. I like that, because some people do use that tactic when you're trying to get somebody ready to fight, talk about how pathetic they are. Then they turn on you. Or they tell you to fight harder because you know the guy next to you is not going to fight as well. Well, then they're the problem. It's a nice additive. The cost is 1 rouse check, and the dice pool is manipulation plus potence. I love the idea of a social challenge with potence. System. When active, the user can add their potence rating to an attempt to rile or incite a person or crowd to violence. In addition, the user can activate this power and roll a contest of manipulation plus potence versus composure plus intelligence of another vampire. If they win, the opposing vampire must make a fury frenzy test at 3 difficulty. The duration lasts for 1 scene. So, as an alternate effect, if used on a vampire, this reminds me of old school animalism, where you can bring out the beast. But being able to piss off another kindred enough to make them frenzy does make a lot of sense for Clan Brujah. They definitely have the experience in pissing people off. Uncanny Grip is another level 3 with 3 level 3s. Interesting. Focusing their unnatural strength into their toes and fingers, the vampire grips and burrows their extremities into almost any surface, enabling them to climb and even hang otherwise unsupported from walls and ceilings. Close observation reveals telltale scarring and deformations of these surfaces afterward. However, as this is an application of brute force, not superhero-style adhesion. You can climb walls like Spider-Man, except instead of actually adhering and sticking to the walls, what you're doing is crushing the material under your hands, creating minute holes, almost like a climbing wall at a gym. 1 rouse check is the cost, and the system says a vampire using this power automatically succeeds on any skill test to climbing a non-metallic surface. The user might also be able to climb copper or bronze cladding, or other softer metal surfaces at the storyteller's discretion. Thin glass surfaces, though generally not the glass curtain wall of modern office buildings, may shatter under the stress. In the same way, a vampire can hang from a wall or ceiling for up to 1 scene, though only barefoot vampires can hang by their feet. The climb, or clinging, leaves obvious tracks, detectable by anyone with an intelligence plus investigation test at difficulty of 2. Detecting uncanny grip, tracks on glass, doesn't even require a roll. Duration, 1 scene. I'm actually very glad that they decided to put that little point in there about skyscrapers and tall glass buildings, because I would think that it just wouldn't work, that they'd just crush through it, but they actually, due to the type of glass, they actually just bend it inward and maybe crack it a little bit, but they don't shatter it, depending on the type of glass. Storyteller discretion advised, of course. The next levels are 4, and the 4th level is Draught of Might. The blood of the vampire... Oh, also, Uncanny Grip reminds me a lot of the Elder Power imprint, which was used in social challenges to scare the dog shit out of anybody you were debating. It was a social discipline, and I enjoyed that. I apologize. Back to level 4. Draught of Might. The blood of the vampire becomes saturated with the power of Potence, conveying a part of that power to anyone who drinks of it. This is the Potence equivalent to Draught of Elegance. Draught of Elegance, which is located on page 254, just for some reference, since we haven't covered that discipline yet, is a level of celerity. So you can give your powers of Potence and celerity. Cost is 1 rouse check. The system. Drinking a rouse check's worth of blood directly from the users gifts the drinker with temporary potence equal to half the potence dots, rounded down, of the donor. So if they have 3, that would be 1. Well, they'd have to have at least 4, wouldn't they? The drinker gains the same powers as the donor up to that level. I think I might have misread that one. I think we shall try that one again. Drinking a rouse check worth of blood directly from the user gifts the drinker with temporary potence equal to half the potence dots, rounded down, of the donor. The drinker gains the same powers as the donor up to that level. Oh, okay, yes. So if you have this power, you at least have 4 levels, correct? So that means you get up to level 2 potence, but you don't get to choose which ones. You get the same exact ones as the person who is giving you that power. It makes a lot of sense. Duration: 1 night for vampires until the next feeding, or the vampire reaches a hunger of 5. Nice. Now level 5 is level 5 is Earth Shock. Their strength and elemental force. The vampire can slam their fist or foot on the ground, creating shockwaves that throw the opponents prone. One of the more dramatic applications of Potence. This power needs to be carefully employed, lest the user literally bring the house down upon them. The cost is 2 round checks. System. No additional test is needed to create the shockwave. The ground is hard. Miss. Anyone within 5 meters radius of the user must make a dexterity plus athletics roll, difficulty of 3. With the result below, anyone prepared for the shockwave, or for the earth shock, such as the user's companion, can shift the results up by 1 step. Critical win, no effect. Win Knock off balance, lose current action. Failure, fall prone. Lose current action, must spend the turn getting off. Interesting. This power causes significant collateral damage. If used on the ground, the earth cracks. If used indoors, furniture breaks and mirrors shatter. On anything but the ground floor, the floor might shatter, causing everyone within the radius to plummet to the floor below. This power can only be used once per scene. Duration, 1 use. That reminds me very much of an additive we had in my old game. We allowed, since we were playing LARP, we were playing the live action version from Laws of the Night, every discipline has 2 levels. You have 2 basics, 2 intermediates, and an advanced. 1 advanced. So I allowed the players to be inventive and create a second advance, just to make their characters a little bit more personal. They could teach that advance to another player if they chose, in which case, with Potence, Puissance was the level 5 of that discipline. So if Brujah A had created another power, which would remind me of this one called Earth, it was called Thunderclap. That's what it was. Instead of slamming your foot on the ground, which was already a power, I believe it was an Elder level, I think it was also called Earth Shock, I might be wrong. But Thundershock, or Thunderclap, was the Brujah using Potence would clap their hands, and it was an amalgam. That one was an amalgam. You had to have at least fortitude to take it. You would take damage if you did not have fortitude. They could teach Thundershock, or Thunderwave. Thunderclap. This is true. You could teach Thunderwave. Yeah. You could teach Thunderclap to another kindred with Potence up to level 5 at that point, in which case they could have to learn. Eventually, your fifth level powers were all different. That was the idea. Moving on. The other level 5 is called Fist of Cain. The vampire's bare hands can inflict grievous injuries lethal to both mortals and other vampires. They can dismember, pierce, impale, decapitate, and even rip the heart out of a chest. Cost is 1 rouse check. System. For 1 scene, the user can inflict aggravated health damage to mortals and supernaturals alike while brawling, as they literally rend flesh and tear their opponent limb from limb with their bare hands. Duration 1 turn. That is a hell of a discipline. And it reminds me, they basically gave feral weapons to a Brujah at that point. So, what have we learned about the Brujah? Some mechanics have changed. I don't think the Brujah would care. Most of those powers were similar, if not better, to what already existed. Socially, the Brujah have gone anarch. Does this bother anyone? It doesn't bother me. They belong there. They are opposition. Hell, I remember the first edition storyline where the Brujah, the Tremere, and the Giovanni were constantly at war with each other because they were the youngest clan and they believed that they were going to inherit the kingdom. I miss the Caravelli Brujah. I still miss the Caravelli I can't tell you how long it's been since they've actually been canon, but there used to be a bloodline of the Brujah called the Caravelli. Caravelli Brujah, I believe, had Pose, Celerity, and Dominate. I might be wrong. I'll have to look that one up, and maybe I'll do a little discussion about them at some time if I decide to handle bloodlines. The Caravelli were a Brujah bloodline based in Sicily, I believe, and they were the ones who had full control over the mafia. Everybody thought it was the Giovanni, but in reality, they did it. If anything, they remind me very much of what we believe the Giovanni Puttanesca would be. They were the crime lords. They were the ones calling the shots in the mob. They're just fun. I like them. Obviously, the majority, or at least the writers, did not, because they were gotten rid of. Hell, in the Mask of the Red Death trilogy, they killed off their leader, Don Caravelli. Either way, my friends, my fire is getting low. After these 4 clan discussions, we might actually have to change cameras. Well, we've learned some fun things. Clan Brujah is tenacious. They're fighters, and they'll never stop. Not much has changed about them. And if you don't like what they've changed, well, what are you then? In-game-wise, what are you then? Are you going to play a Brujah in the Anarchs? Are you going to play a Brujah in the Camarilla, the Rarity? And let's not forget the anti-tribute. What exactly does the team at World of Darkness have us waiting for when it comes to the Sabbat? What's left of that skeletal faction? Are they going to return from the Gehenna Wars in the East? I know right now that at least Justin Achille is working on something for them. He admits that himself. Now, back in the day when I learned about the Brujah anti-tribute, we always had them played off as a Zen Brujah. They were darker than those in the Camarilla, don't get me wrong on that one. They will kill you, much like any of the Sabbat will, for the honor of Cain and all that. But unlike their brimming to the surface with rage brothers, the Brujah anti-tribute are calm and collected. That's terrifying. How much power with no hold-up. They still suffered from the same issues that Clan Brujah had. If anything, they could be more sadistic. But on the night-to-night of their life, they strive to be more in control, denying the beast. And that's just not what Sabbat does. Are the Sabbat Brujah anti-tribute nothing but the same thing as standard Brujah, but with different political leanings? I think we'll find out soon. And when we do, I'll be waiting. Because I have to say, the World of Darkness has definitely gotten a lot more interesting. The lore itself has shown us new things that I never would have expected. Clan Brujah. The rebels, the rabble, the fighters, the scholars. It doesn't matter what you call them, because they will be the exact opposite to spite you. Maybe the ones in the cam can change it from the inside. We don't. Either way, it doesn't matter. The Brujah are the Brujah, and they will always be the Brujah. Until the last Brujah is snuffed out. I pray that never happens. We need the Brujah. They're the only thing lighting a fire under the Venture's ass to keep them going. But I think we're going to talk about the Venture next time. For right now, for our World of Darkness, I am Voivode McCann. Thank you for listening to my little rant. I'm Clan Brujah. Good evening.